8:43 morning, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Right,
should we talk papers?
Yes, let's go through the papers. We've got Emma Wolfe with us and Fraser Myers. And if we start with you, Emma, you've been looking in the Times about COVID fines.
Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting story in the light of all the kind of fixed penalty notices and didn't they have some birthday cake kind of discussions we've had for months, well, over a year now, about politicians. Teenagers who can't pay their COVID party fines are now being slapped with criminal records. This is so unfair. This is many, 57,000 under 25-year-olds who were students, who were starting university at the beginning of lockdown, who wanted to gather in groups of more than 5 and maybe had little parties, are being, well, first of all, they were fined 200. In some cases, this has now escalated to 2,500. When they can't pay that, they're now being issued with criminal records. Amazingly, around half of all the people who were issued with fixed penalty notices were aged 18 to 24 during the pandemic, when, you know, those are the people who desperately needed.
Remember, it was at the beginning, and you felt, and we saw those terrible pictures. I think it was from Nottingham Uni, wasn't it? The pictures of the kids up against the glass, sort of looking at the outside world.
Looking at the outside world.
I mean,
this is people getting together to talk to other students, to talk to their peers at the age when you desperately need kind of social interaction, quite apart from any kind of university experience.
Well, in the light of the Sean Bailey party, the Jingle and Mingle party...
And he's been in no...
Which were organised with full knowledge and understanding of the rules that they were breaking, the restrictions that they had invented and were then completely flouting and lying about.
Yeah. So if they did that, you can't give a load of teenagers criminal.
And this is going on and on and on. There's a young woman here who's literally facing, you know, a criminal record because she can't pay £2,500 because she couldn't pay the original fine, and she went to a party and she just started at uni.
But if you've got any common sense and they did let them off, there are probably thousands of other people in this country who did.
There are 3 years on, thousands of cases are still going through the courts, and some people are being fined up to £10,000 for hosting slightly larger gatherings, parties.
Well, some people sort of flouted it completely, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly, and I think there's a balance between a huge rave and getting together with other students.
But how do you decide who has a decent case for, you know, being forgiven?
I think all the restrictions were bonkers from the beginning and utterly wrong-headed, and I think the politicians have proved that because they broke the rules themselves.
Well, they're going to have to pay back some of the fines then, aren't they, if that's what they do? It's a difficult one to know what to do now, but after all the stories that have come out, as you said, how can you possibly go ahead and fine teenagers?
It's all whether you think the restrictions were right or wrong, actually. And I've got to say, I generally think it was the right idea. Maybe not with hindsight, but at the time. But that's a separate argument.
The balance. The balance of.
But it's the balance of when you see what has happened in that particular party where the video was released, you can't then pursue
other people.
For
and what a waste of legal resources to be pursuing thousands of people through the courts for something that happened 3 years ago. You know, let's just be honest. It's over now. We have to move on. Is it really worth pursuing these young people, giving them a criminal record for rules which, as you say, may or may not be, you know, may or may not have made sense?
I really think an amnesty is the way to go.
Yes.
You know, cancel all these fines, give the money back. And as you said earlier, you know, some people were fined £10,000. That's a life-ruining amount of money.
I think that was students in Nottingham actually got £10,000.
Essentially, if you had a gathering of more than 6 people or something like that, and people would find that for organising protests as well, which is a really, you know, something that should never have been banned. You should always have the right to protest, pretty much, even during an emergency. Perhaps especially during an emergency when, you know, lots of people disagreed with the rules and thought that that was something worth challenging. So it's a reminder of this kind of strange authoritarian time we lived through, and I think we need to, you know, recompensate.
And you have to weigh it up. You have to keep on the other side. I really think that isolating people, shutting them away, not allowing them to talk to other people is as damaging in some ways as possibly transmitting a virus which for many young people would not have been more than a bad flu.
But we didn't know it all that time.
Okay, but assessing, you know, risk, there is always a risk in anything. And, you know, let's shut people away if they get flu, frankly.
No, I just think that lessons have to be learned, but an amnesty might be a very good idea.
But
then that's tantamount to the government saying we got it wrong, and I can't see any government saying
well, they've already admitted that by breaking the rules themselves.
Let's look at the Sunday Times, Fraser, and the PM taking an ear bashing
Yeah, so there's been a lot of focus groups in the run-up to all these various by-elections, and voters are absolutely not happy. There's been some quite extraordinary things coming out of the focus groups, people saying that Sunak is like a snake, that he's as dead as a dodo. Lots of people... Basically, the mood has changed in a sense, because when Sunak took over, a lot of people were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. They sort of blamed Liz Truss for messing up the economy and thought Sunak seems sensible, he will put us on the right path. But now, you know, almost a year later, actually things are worse. You know, there was a bit of a reversion to a bit of a recovery, but now things are worse. People's mortgages are higher than they were in the wake of the mini budget. Lots of the sort of complex, you know, none of us really care about gilt yields or whatever, but that does have an impact on people's finances. And people are saying, well, you know, this guy, he's presented himself as Mr. Fix-It. You know, what has he fixed?
And we were told it's going to be better in the summer, you know, all this crisis about the cost of living. I think that's the main thing that people are really, really unhappy and anxious about. Inflation was going to come down. Food prices haven't. They are still, you know, extremely elevated, like 18, 19%. He had his... It was so dramatic after Liz Truss that he had his kind of, you know, it couldn't have been worse, really, after that dramatic entry into prime ministership. And things haven't got, as you say, they haven't got better, and MPs are unhappy as well.
And at the beginning of the year, people remember his big promise was to halve inflation. And a lot of economists...
And stop the boat, and do all the other things that he has not done.
And he hasn't done. But a lot of economists took the mick out of Sunak when he announced that back in January, because they said, well, look, inflation's going to come down anyway, you know, whatever the government policy is. And it hasn't. It's really remained stubbornly high.
It must be very difficult for him on the doorsteps at the moment, mustn't it?
Because aside from not having fixed any of these problems that he said he was going to fix, he doesn't really have a positive vision for the country either. So, you know, you're thinking, what is it that I'm going to get if I vote for Sunak? He hasn't fixed these problems, and where is he going to take us?
Yeah, but what you're going to get voting for anybody else is a legitimate question, because if he hasn't got the answers, I don't know that anybody else has.
And Labour is essentially saying, you know, elsewhere in the Times, that they're going to stick to the Tory spending plans.
Yeah.
So
that's really vote winner, isn't it?
Which is
it's all very odd.
They're copying the Blair playbook there, because that's what Tony Blair did before '97. Said, you know, we're going to stick to the Tories' rigid plans to almost say we're competent on the economy, but people don't trust the Tories for economic competence. So why
at the moment? We've got to leave it there. Emma, Fraser, it's been really good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. Now we've